Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start today's video with a revenge story so chaotic it took down an entire company's reputation. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. How one fired employee rigged the company's Best Workplace Award. I worked for about 5 years for a company where by the end I was practically suicidal from the stress and the mistreatment. When I left, I was operating as a supervisor without the pay for a shift I wasn't even on. To give you an idea of just how awful this company was, I gained nearly a $10 an hour pay increase by leaving, and I had a fraction of the responsibility. Everything was fine until the COVID nation attacked, and considering the industry I was now in, it was a given that I'd receive a pink slip. The following year that transpired was the most hectic, stressful, and difficult period of my life. To try and spare you any unnecessary details, what transpired was me having to fire one contract agency for grossly padding my resume, only for this new contract agency to end up bait and switching me, promising me administrative experience, the degree I was working on at the time, only to turn me around and send me back to my former employer that I had so desperately wanted to leave in the past. Why? They'd become their biggest client because they were a respiratory medical device company and business was obviously booming. Desperate for an income, I agreed and kept sending out resumes in the meantime. I was only back for 4 weeks, but holy hell, the place was like a war zone run by the most masochistic idiots you ever met. Some of the crap the company was pulling, trying to squeeze every last ounce of productivity, was appalling. They decided to try an old stick and carrot ploy, whereby if you worked 20-plus hours of overtime each week between Thanksgiving and New Year's, you could get a $2,000 cash bonus. It probably goes without saying, you had people so desperate for spare cash that people were literally risking their lives to get to work. We had no less than 2 winter storms that shut down the state in the 4 weeks I was there, but the company found every loophole to exploit to keep from paying out these bonuses. They also lacked any semblance of compassion. I was on my way to work when my car lunged its throw-out bearing, leaving me stranded. I called both the temp agency and my employer, who immediately told me that if I didn't show, it was my job. I was 2 hours late, and they complained to my temp agency anyways because I refused to make up the lost time by staying and assisting the overnight crew. I left when I finally got hired by another medical device company full-time, meaning I could give the temp agency and my former employer the middle finger. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I had made friends during my time there, much like POWs commiserating over trauma, and many still were working for the old company, and it was through them that I, and so many more jilted comrades, learned of the contest. You see, the state this all took place in is small, not the smallest, but close to it, so there's an independent business magazine for the state that holds a competition for best company to work for in state. My former employer had actually won the award about a year before I exited stage left the first time around. It had been the requisite waiting time, and the company could now reapply to try and reclaim their glory. All the naked little emperors running this company were so high in their ivory towers, falsely believed everything was coming up roses. How this competition works is the company is interviewed by the magazine, and a link to an online survey is sent out to be disseminated to the respective employees. Thus, when me and so many who had a Discord group at the time learned of it through someone still with the employee of these B-turds, they were more than willing to become a mole, and when the surveys were sent out, the former employees received one as well. It goes without saying, but we trashed this place in the survey. At the end, you could leave a comment, and so I regaled them with the abuse I faced my initial employment with the company, and how when I was forced back, I left when my former boss insulted me in an email for having the audacity to leave in the first place, all the while using my newly deceased mother to prop up her own sob story. You may think it ends there, but it doesn't. That's not where the revenge comes in. Oh no, imagine the shock when a message comes through the Discord group. Holy crap, you guys, if you open the survey in an incognito browser, you can take it as many times as you want. Me and my crew had gone from slingshots to being gifted a cannon, and we were not going to waste the opportunity. We proceeded to send in negative surveys as often as we could, and our mole would forward us the HR updates, and when 90% participation was reached, we halted our attack and waited. A week before the results would be announced, our mole informed us that bubbly was being stockpiled in the break room fridges. I had the forethought to monitor their LinkedIn and Facebook pages. Every other post was about the BCTWF award and how excited they were to achieve it, assured victory was in the bag. Then the announcement came, and our mole excitedly texted us that management was silent bedlam, the bubbly magically disappearing from the fridges, any social media post referring to the contest or magazine vanished, and no one was allowed to talk about. They'd obviously not expected such a pitiful defeat, but the results from the survey was so troubling they came back to my former employer to go over the results. The company never really recovered from that point onward and struggled to remain upright. Most recently, they had to delist from the stock exchange and go back to suckling venture capitalists. You turned a petty corporate vanity contest into a scandalous reveal party and then walked away while they scrubbed the champagne stains. The incognito trick was peak guerrilla HR warfare, low effort, maximum humiliation. Love that you and the crew coordinated like it was a heist movie, then watched management choke on their own hubris. Perfect revenge. No brutality, just truth amplified until the tower crumbled. And our next story. My horrible boss refused to pay me for 6 months, so I took the whole company down. A few years back, I worked in sales for a big-time corporation, one of those success story companies that loves to plaster motivational quotes on the walls while bleeding its employees dry behind the scenes. My first boss there was genuinely kind, the sort of person who brought coffee for everyone, asked about your day, and meant it. She made the job bearable. But of course, kindness doesn't last long in a company run by people who treat empathy like a liability. They fired her in a wave of so-called budget cuts along with half our department. Somehow I made the cut, probably because I hit my numbers and didn't complain. But then they hired a new boss, a man named Rick. And I swear, if misery had a face, it would be his. Rick strutted in like he owned the place, immediately changing everything that worked. He demanded we come in an hour earlier to get ahead, then made us stay late to finish strong. Suddenly, my 8-hour job turned into a 12-hour hostage situation. The man micromanaged us down to how we breathed. He'd stand behind my chair and make comments like, maybe smile more when you talk to clients. Men like that. Yeah, that kind of guy. It got worse when the next round of budget cuts hit. They fired another half of the team, including my best friend, Lisa, who I'd started the job with. She and I used to joke that we'd either both quit or both get promoted someday. Instead, she was gone, and I was stuck picking up the work of 2 people without a raise, bonus, or even a thank you. Then Rick crossed a line I'll never forget. One morning, I dropped my purse while setting up for a meeting. I bent down to grab it, and he spanked me. Smacked me right there in the middle of the office like it was some kind of joke. I froze. My stomach dropped. I told him never to touch me again, and he just laughed and said, "Relax, it's just a pat on the back." Or, well, lower back. I wanted to quit. Every day I'd wake up with this sinking dread in my chest thinking I could be anywhere else doing anything else. Why am I still here? Then came the paycheck problem, one missed payment, then another. I was making about $3,300 a month, but after 6 months of we're having temporary cash flow issues, I hadn't seen a single cent. Rick kept feeding me excuses. We had some setbacks. You'll get it next month. Our accounting department's swamped. You'll get a bonus once we recover. Just hang tight. Hang tight? I was barely hanging on. Rent, food, transportation, all of it started falling apart. I had to borrow money from my parents just to survive. Every time I asked about payment, Rick acted like I was being unreasonable for wanting the money I earned. Then one afternoon, he called me into his office and fired me. "Your schedule completion rates are slipping," he said, as if he hadn't buried me in double the workload. I saw red. I walked out shaking, furious, humiliated, and then I did something I should have done months earlier. I got a lawyer. He listened, took notes, and at one point just said, "They didn't pay you for 6 months?" When I nodded, he smiled, the kind of smile that means someone's about to get wrecked. We collected everything: emails, text messages, pay stubs, written schedules, even copies of the company's public quarterly reports showing their profits were just fine. I filed a lawsuit against the company, not Rick, but the CEO himself, for unpaid wages, emotional distress, and workplace harassment. Total damages around $20,000. On the day of the trial, the CEO actually tried to bribe the judge, slid him a $500 check like this was some bad sitcom. The judge didn't even look at it, just said, "Put that away before I add bribery to the charges." When the judge asked the CEO to provide proof that they'd paid me, he had nothing, not one document. He hadn't even bothered to forge fake ones. That's how cocky they were. My lawyer handed over our evidence, months of unpaid bills, time cards, HR complaints that had mysteriously gone missing, and even a few other ex-employees willing to testify about their own missing wages. It was open and shut. The judge ruled in my favor. The company had to pay me every cent of the $20,000 I was owed, plus additional penalties. It hit the local news. The CEO's smug face was plastered online next to headlines about exploiting workers and unpaid wages scandal. Within 6 months, the company's reputation tanked. Clients pulled out, the corporation went bankrupt, Rick was fired and blacklisted in the industry. And me? I used that $20K to buy a car, pay off rent, and go back to school. I eventually earned my PhD in English and now write novels for a living. You spent 6 months working for free while this guy strutted around playing power games? That's not dedication, that's corporate gaslighting. The whole hang tight, we'll pay you next month line? Classic move from shady employers who think desperation is loyalty. I honestly don't know how you kept showing up after the third missed paycheck. Most people would have burned the building down or, at the very least, walked out with the office coffee machine as compensation. And our next story. My neighbor blamed my dry well for flooding her $25,000 backyard. So I live in North Jersey, right on top of one of those hilly streets where if you drop a marble at the top, it'll probably roll straight into Manhattan. I'm 3 houses down from the crest, which means everything from uphill flows through my yard, and my neighbor, Karen, yes, her real name, might as well be Karen, lives 1 house further down. Now, if you know anything about New Jersey storms lately, you know they've gone from grab an umbrella to build an ark. The last few years, we've had flash floods that turn driveways into whitewater rapids. So after one particularly bad storm flooded half my backyard and almost took my shed with it, I decided enough was enough. I hired a landscaper, a professional licensed guy, to install a dry well system in the far corner of my yard. We also redirected 2 downspouts and my sump pump runoff straight into it. It was a clean setup, buried deep with gravel and filter fabric, no standing water, no surface discharge. Basically, I did everything by the book. For a while, life was good. My lawn stayed dry, my basement didn't flood, and I thought I'd finally beaten Mother Nature at her own game. But then came Karen. About a month ago, she shows up at my door, hair frizzed, shoes muddy, and looking like she just crawled out of a monsoon. Before I could even say hello, she starts screaming, "Do you know what you've done? My backyard looks like a damn swamp. 20 years I've lived here, and I've never had this problem until you started messing with your property." Now I'm standing there with my coffee like, "Lady, are you really blaming me for rain?" I let her rant. Apparently she'd just spent $25,000 redoing her backyard. Fancy rock channel, new sod, decorative stone edging, the works. And now, after the last storm, it all washed out. According to her, my little dry well had somehow caused it. I tried explaining calmly, "Karen, my downspouts have always drained in that direction. The only difference is now the water goes into a dry well underground, not out onto the lawn. There's no way it's adding more water to your yard." But you know how Karens are. She cut me off immediately. "You don't know what you're talking about. I talked to my cousin, and he's in construction. He says your sump pump probably burst." Her cousin, the construction expert, apparently moonlights as a hydrologist, meteorologist, and magician. I tried reasoning again. The dry well's buried 3 feet deep in gravel. It can't cause surface flooding. If anything, it's helping. "No," she shouted, pointing at me like she was summoning a curse. "You're lying. You're sending your water onto my property." At that point, I'd had enough. I told her the truth. Weather patterns have changed, storms are heavier, and her yard's basically a natural bowl on a hill. Not exactly my fault. The laws of physics aren't in her favor. She didn't like that answer. Over the next week, she started escalating. I caught her taking pictures of my yard, pacing along the fence line with her phone out, narrating loudly like she was filming a documentary. "See, right there, that's where it all comes from." Then she started showing up whenever it rained, umbrella in one hand, camera in the other, muttering things like, "Gotcha," every time a puddle formed. But the kicker came when I got home one afternoon to find a bright yellow notice taped to my mailbox. Notice of complaint, water runoff dispute. Karen had gone to the township to file a complaint against me. Now, our township's inspector's a nice guy, old school, knows his stuff. He came by, did his inspection, and after about 10 minutes said, "This is one of the cleanest drainage setups I've seen in years. She's got no case. If anything, you're helping reduce runoff." He even walked down to Karen's house afterward. I watched from my window as she argued with him for half an hour, waving her arms like she was directing traffic. Eventually, he just threw his hands up, got in his truck, and drove off. The next day, I caught her standing at the bottom of the hill, staring up at my property with a look that could curdle milk. She yelled, "Don't think this is over." Oh, it was. Because the following week, we got hit with another torrential downpour, a real biblical one, thunder, lightning, sheets of rain. I looked out my window and saw water gushing like a river down the street, but my yard, bone dry, not a drop out of place. The next morning, I took a little walk down the hill. Karen's brand new $25,000 backyard, washed out again, rocks everywhere, mulch floating like soup. And right there in the middle of her ruined rock bed was a brand new drainage trench she'd obviously tried digging herself, and it pointed directly uphill toward my property. So I did what any good neighbor would do. I grabbed my shovel, walked over, and filled it back in. She stormed outside, yelling, "What are you doing?" I smiled and said, "Just helping you stop that surface flow problem." Haven't heard from her since. But the best part? Last week I got a letter from the township thanking me for proactively managing property drainage and even using my setup as a model recommendation for future stormwater control guidelines. So now, not only did Karen lose her backyard twice, but my terrible dry well is officially town-approved best practice. And you better believe I framed that letter right next to the window that overlooks her yard. You basically became a one-person case study in why engineering beats emotion. Karen brought accusations, you brought compliance, inspection reports, and hydrology. The best part isn't even her yard collapsing twice, it's that the township literally used your design as a template. The complainer forced the city to praise the person she accused. Sometimes the best revenge is quietly outcompetenting your critics while nature and bureaucracy back you up. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.